Wowee. I'm pretty sure that if you lose to the worst team in basketball 2 times in the span of a week, you become the worst team in basketball. Hornets Wizards recap ahead. Let's talk it out. Bring it in. Everybody needs a hug. Let's do it. It's Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
Welcome in. This is Locked On Hornets. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Thank you for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every day. We are free and daily wherever you get your podcasts, and that includes YouTube. We also have a free newsletter. Go to LockedOnDaily.com to sign up today. You'll not only hear from me on that newsletter, make that your first read, you can also get writing from Katie Heindel of Basketball Feelings, Mike Shear of Basketball Poetry, and fantasy basketball tips from Josh Lloyd of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. So again, LockedOnDaily.com, sign up for free and get our newsletter every day. I'm Doug Branson. I write for EveryHornetsBoxScore.com. David Walker was supposed to join me today. He also writes for EveryHornetsBoxScore.com, but he woke up this morning not feeling well. I don't blame him if he watched this game against the Washington Wizards. I'm not sure how many fans are feeling very well this morning. Some of the performances, particularly in the first 3 quarters, were sickening before this Hornets team once again decided to figure things out in the fourth quarter when it was far too late, and really became a possession game at the end. We're going to get to that recap in a second. I'm typically joined by Walker Mail of WFNZ. He's on vacation this week. He will be with you all of next week as I go on vacation, and then the family will get back together after this New Year's break to continue to figure out not only where this Hornets team is, but where they will be moving forward. And that's kind of how I want to structure this episode. We're going to talk about the apocalypse that was the first 3 quarters of this game against the Washington Wizards, some of the most abominable basketball that I've seen the Charlotte Hornets play in many seasons. Like, I tried to rack my brain to think about a game or a time in which I thought that the Hornets played worse basketball than I saw, and particularly in that first half against Washington. The third quarter, they started to figure some things out, and then the fourth quarter, they fully figured it out, but couldn't win the game down at the end. And so maybe then we talk about the end of the game, and then I just want to talk about how this team moves forward from this, because they have to continue to play basketball. They're not going to make a trade tomorrow, most likely, so they've got to play the Oklahoma City Thunder. They have to dig themselves out of this adversity that they're facing right now, and so we'll discuss a little bit about that in the final segment. But let's start with this game against Washington, and I said my first bullet point in the Every Hornets box score rundown was the Charlotte Hornets are a bad basketball team, period. And then I moved to the next bullet point. No qualifiers, no caveats. I just felt like that needed to be the bullet point before we dive into the specifics, because they are playing like a bad basketball team. Bad basketball teams lose to good teams. They lose to bad teams. They lose 6 in a row. They lose 14 of their last 15 games. And they look out of sorts. They look like they're not having a great time. They don't look like they're playing as a team. And that's how you could qualify what the Hornets looked like in the first half. And it wasn't one player. This is a team problem. But when you have things go as poorly as they did in the first half, which again, they got Brandon Miller back for this game. He missed the past 3 games with an ankle sprain. He was questionable. Finally returns to this game, but he struggled to shoot. LaMelo Ball was struggling to shoot early on. And then when they would move the basketball, there were a lot of sloppy turnovers, trying to get the ball to Mark Williams in the post, trying to get the ball to Nick Richards or Moussa Diabate. And once that started to happen, and once Jordan Poole started to hit some shots and Corey Kispert got to the rim, Alex Sarr hit a few open 3-point shots in the first half. Once that started to happen and Washington built a lead, you could feel the team go into DGAF mode, don't give a bleep mode. And LaMelo Ball was in that category. Miles Bridges was in that category. Josh Green disappearing. Cody Martin not being focused on the defensive end, getting 3 fouls early in this game. The Hornets actually shot better as a team from 3, around 40%, but the best 2 shooters, LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, combined for 8 of 25 from 3. That's 32%. And it continues a string of games in which LaMelo and Brandon, when they've been available, have struggled to shoot. And really, I want to actually look at a particular possession that I think cost them the game and Charles Lee thought cost them the game. We can do this sort of like in-depth film study. We can talk about stats. We can talk about trends. We can do all of that. But the bottom line for this team is that if LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller combine to shoot less than 35%, sure, but I would even say, like, if they shoot less than 30%, and kind of your chances of winning go to 50-50. If they shoot less than 35%, I think your chances of winning really, and I won't say go down to nil because they almost won this game. I mean, they went ahead with seconds to go. But you're going to struggle to win against any team, including the team with the worst record in the NBA. It doesn't matter if you're playing the Trailblazers, the Wizards, the Jazz. You are going to really struggle to win basketball games. The Hornets' frustration builds, and a lot of it has to do with their own offensive ineptitude, their inability to move the basketball, their indecisiveness outside of LaMelo Ball. Like, LaMelo Ball is very decisive with what he wants to do. Brandon Miller, at most of the time, very decisive with what he wants to do. Everyone else, when the ball finds their hand and they have to make a decision on where to go with the basketball, that's when the play gets a little bit gunked up. And that's when the defense has a moment to like react and pack the paint, close that option down, and then you're forcing the Hornets to shoot. And that's not a good thing because they don't have a lot of 3-point shooters. And that's when LaMelo Ball is going to jack up a ton of long threes that are going to be open for him. And that's when bad offense turns into bad defense. And that's what happened, particularly in this first half. I heard Eric and Dell harp on the fact that, like, they're scoring enough points, it's the defense that's the problem. The problem with that analysis is that it's the offensive struggles, it's the offensive indecisiveness, it's the offensive turnovers that led to Washington, who plays some of the fastest basketball anyway. They're going to push the pace off misses. They're certainly going to push the pace when they get turnovers. That's what led to run out after run out after run out. And honestly, like, teams cannot be expected to constantly get back into transition. It's like in the NFL when an offense is turning the ball over, interceptions, fumbles, and the defense is constantly having to defend from their own 20-yard line. Like, they're going to give up points. That's what's going to happen. So yes, they probably could have gotten back into transition a little bit better in the first half, but they were constantly in transition. You're not going to have a chance to get a lead, to maintain a lead if that constantly happens. And you saw it particularly in the second quarter and the third quarter when the Hornets would go on runs. And Dell mentioned this in the broadcast. When they would go on, 5-6 point runs, it would be followed by just an absolutely dumbfounding, backbreaking turnover. I think about this particular possession where Nick Richards has the ball up at the top of the break, above the 3-point line, and he's just holding the ball over his head, and you have Bridges backing his man down, calling for the ball. You have like 2 or 3 guys in the paint, and then Nick Richards up top. Nobody's going to hang with Nick Richards up top. So what does that mean? Everybody's down in the paint, and you give just 1-2 seconds, and the defense now is fully collapsed on it. And then Nick Richards, like, rainbow passes the ball and into the teeth of the defense, immediate turnover, and then somebody leaks out. Jordan Poole, somebody got a layup out of it. Crazy stuff. Like, why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense. It looked like one of those like SeaWorld expeditions where they're throwing, fish to the sea lions. Like there's just no chance of that becoming a good play. And so when you have stuff like that happening on the floor, mixed with the Cody Martin fouls and not being able to contain Jordan Poole. Then you switch Josh Green onto Jordan Poole. He's fully focused on the defensive end, so he's an absolute no-show on the offensive end. And then you have Mark Williams, who was good as a roll man offensively, but that was about it. He got bullied in the paint the entire game by Jonas Valanciunas, and then Sarr pulling both him and Nick Richards out and hitting threes. We'll talk about the adjustment that Charles Lee made to counter that in just a second. And I think we should get to some silver linings in the next segment, because I'm kind of going off right now on all the things that I saw that were bad. This was actually a really easy game to write about because the problems were so obvious. Sometimes I do write-ups for every Hornets box score, and I'm like, this game sort of like didn't have much of a flow. It was kind of clunky, and the Hornets ended up losing, but I'm not sure really like what the thing you can point to that they lost on. This one was very simple, and yet there were multiple things. It was just all the things were very clear. But Mark Williams was getting bullied in the paint, and they eventually had to put him on Bilal Coulibaly. That was the adjustment. It was a good adjustment, but it's not great when you have to put Mark Williams and Nick Richards on an opposing team's wing. It's not good for Bilal Coulibaly. It's not good for the centers that have to be put on him. It was happening on the defensive end of the floor, and then offensively, when Mark Williams was catching lobs, thumbs up. When Mark Williams had the ball and had to do anything else in the post, thumbs down. Kind of the same situation with Nick Richards. Okay, let's take a short pause and then come back. We'll talk some silver linings and do a little tape study on the end of this game, because this game did get close. Final score was 113 to 110. They were down 21. Made some got out of the halftime break, figured some things out in the third quarter, and then really put the hammer down in the fourth quarter. We'll talk about why that happened, do a little film study, and then also what's next for the Hornets. We'll look at the schedule and philosophically, like what's next for the Hornets. That's all coming up. Today's episode of the Locked On Hornets podcast is brought to you by our friends at Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. That's Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Want to do silver linings? Maybe I do it within this next thing that I want to do, which is just kind of a box score boogie. Let's kind of let's go through the box score and talk about some things. Miles Bridges leading the team in game score in this game, which sort of accounts for all of the box score elements in positive ways and minus ways, and comes up with a game score, 22.5. 22 points, 14 rebounds, 6 assists on 47% shooting, and 50% from two. Was one of the leaders of the team that actually shot well from three, 4 of 9 in this game. And then in the fourth quarter, he scored 7 points, was really important to the fourth quarter of this game. And important game for him because he was vocal about the players-only meeting and his role within it. And I said in the last episode, it was a little bit of the hot dog guy meme from I Think You Should Leave, which is like, we're all looking for the guy who did this. And it's like, well, Miles Bridges, you haven't been playing well to start games, and that has hurt the team. And then you get into the fourth quarter when it's far too late, and then you make your run. That didn't happen in this game. Miles actually put a complete game together. Defensively, part of that adjustment that I mentioned in the first segment, where you had Mark Williams on Bilal Coulibaly, that was switching. That was less about Mark Williams and more about switching Miles Bridges onto Jonas Valanciunas and Alex Sarr, because then Miles could chase Alex Sarr around, run him off the line, but then also Miles Bridges was just doing a better job being physical down low, being a presence, hitting somebody, getting rebounds, and he scores 14 to Mark Williams 8 to Nick Richards 5. Again, not very good when you're talking about sort of the long-term prospects of your front court assets that you've invested draft picks and money, in the case of Nick Richards, into. But I will give it up, silver lining, to Charles Lee, who I think that was a super savvy mid-game adjustment that helped the Hornets drag themselves back into this game. LaMelo Ball led all scorers with 31 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, was 44% from the field. Right before the fourth quarter, where he missed a few at the end of the game, he was above 50% field goal percentage, but his three-point percentage was in the tank in this one, 4 of 13 from the field. Mark Williams, 16, 8, 5. Brandon Miller, 18 points, 3 rebounds, 9 assists, career-high 9 assists for Brandon Miller in a return game where he plays 36 minutes off the return. No minutes restriction for him after missing 3 games. He's missed 7 games total this season, 4 at the beginning of the season for that glute strain. But I'm super impressed. Brandon Miller, 18 points, 3 rebounds, 9 assists. He did miss what would have been the go-ahead or game-winning shot had he hit it. It was a design play. There were a couple of options, I think, on that play. And Brandon Miller gets open. I mean, it's a tough shot, but it's a good look for Brandon. We've seen him hit it. I mean, it was somewhat similar. It was closer to the corner than it was kind of the wing 3 that he hit in the game winner against Detroit. But that's a shot that he could hit. That was a good look, just didn't go down. The Hornets never should have been in that position. And they were in that position because of everything that I talked about in the first segment, but also game got close in the fourth quarter. They run a great sidelines out of bounds play off a timeout, and LaMelo Ball drags the defense towards him, gets it up to Mark Williams, who finishes. That puts them ahead. And then Jordan Poole, just ISO play against Josh Green, gets Josh Green on skates, can't recover, 3-point shot. That put them up 2, and then the Hornets go for the win. And I guess you could question, like, why go for the win at that point? But if you watch that game, I'm kind of in Lee's camp. Either we get out of here in regulation with a win or we go the hell home. And they're going home to face Oklahoma City. So that's not great. But, you know, I don't know that all the good vibes after that Poole 3 were going to be with Washington. And I just don't know that they go into overtime and really have a shot at winning that game. So I kind of like putting it in Brandon Miller's hands in that situation, despite the fact that he wasn't shooting well. That's a situation that I just want make or miss. I want to see him in more. And so, like, I'm totally cool with that. And LaMelo playing the decoy in that situation after, you know, he was really responsible for helping get them back into the game in the third quarter, 14 points in that quarter. So those were some silver linings. Let's see what else. I did have a number of silver linings that I put in this. I mentioned Miles Bridges, the ATO slob play was good. Nobody was hurt. I mean, I think that you always have to take away that as a positive. Miles Bridges showing up, Charles Lee making the adjustment. Yeah, those were it. There were not a lot of silver linings that you could take. I said to the chat on every Hornets box score, this was either going to be a horrible loss, which it was, or they were going, you know, that slob play to Mark Williams was going to be a immoral victory because you're not feeling great. You want to win every opportunity you have. You want to win, but that you were not going to feel great about losing to the Washington Wizards twice in a week, particularly, again, how they lost, looking so frustrated. You know, some people in the chat on everyhornetsboxscore.com use the term apathy. Multiple people used that. They looked apathetic in the first half. I kind of disagree. I don't think they looked apathetic, because apathy to me is, I don't care if we win or lose. I'm not interested in this game. I'm not interested in playing hard. I don't think that's the problem with this team. I think this team is frustrated. I think they've lost a little bit of the belief that they had at the beginning of this season. They've lost touch with the principles, with the ideas that they established in training camp, preseason, and then the beginning of the regular season. They had some ideas of how they wanted to play basketball, and whether it was injuries or this poor shooting performance, all of this and they've just come unfurled. They've come loosened from the principles that got them some early season success, and that's what they have to get back to. And that's where I say the DGAF basketball that we saw from LaMelo Ball and from Miles Bridges, it's And it just goes down the line. Cody Martin, a little bit from Brandon Miller too. Like it is, I think you saw less of the bad body language in this game than you saw, but you did see some of it than you saw in previous games. But you did see some of it in this game, and that's what Lee and that's what LaMelo Ball and that's what Miles Bridges and all of these guys, these team leaders, that's what they have to figure out, because they're going to play a lot of road games, but people are still, they're paying their $20 to watch it on the FanDuel Sports app. They're paying their cable subscriptions mainly because they want to watch the Hornets. And there are people that are going to these home games. There are people that travel to watch the Hornets. They deserve to watch a win or lose. They deserve to watch a fundamentally decent basketball product, like a team that is playing a style of basketball that, if the talent level were matching, would be conducive to winning. That's not what you saw in the first half. That's where this is where I think the Tankanistas and the people that want the Hornets to make the playoffs, we can all align on one thing, I think, is that you have to learn how to win. And that doesn't mean you always win. That just means you have to learn how to play basketball in a functional way that, again, if the talent level, if the depth of your team were to match and you get a little luck on your side, then that's conducive to winning. Then you will win significantly more games than you will lose. And that's not what we've been seeing in this 6-game losing streak over the course of these 15 games. They've gotten away from so many of the things that would make them a functional basketball team. And yes, and I've talked about it a lot on this show, there are fundamental issues that, that are not about, well, you got to play hard, you got to get after it, you got to show grit and grind and da. There are fundamental issues on this team that will prevent them from winning on some nights. But if you, as a team leader, if you're LaMelo Ball, if you're Brandon Miller, if you're Miles Bridges, if you allow that idea, because I think that's what happens with LaMelo Ball sometimes, he knows basketball on a level that is, even some of the better players in this league, I think he understands the game on a higher level. And so I think sometimes look, you can, if you know ball in that way, and you watch this team and you make plays and those plays aren't made in the way that other teams make them, if passes aren't made that should have been made, if you're not catching the basketball on some of these very simple passes that LaMelo Ball is throwing to you after he's drawing the defense and not taking the shot himself, he knows that on a level, and you can respond to that one or two ways. You can continue to stay, keep in your resolve and lift the team up. We tend to call those kind of players superstars, or you can sort of lean back into a selfish way of playing basketball. And I think that's sometimes what happens to LaMelo Ball. And I think we can call those players star players, but you can't get to the superstar level until you can prove that you can lift the bad team on some nights. Not going to mean you're going to do it every night, but on some nights. Like, there are a few of these games that I can point to that I go, man, a great LaMelo Ball performance, and I'm not just talking about 31 points. I'm talking about just a great all-around performance, stuff that shows up in the box score and stuff that doesn't show up in the box score, could have used that on that night. Let me know what you think on YouTube in the comments. I know, people that love LaMelo Ball are going to let me know what they think about what I just said there. But you can't argue with some of the results here. Okay, I do want to get to a little film study because there was a possession in the fourth quarter that Charles Lee pointed to as a reason they lost this game. I think it's important to kind of check that out and talk about why it's important, plus where the Hornets go from here. That's coming up on Locked On Hornets. Today's episode of Locked On Hornets is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs, they're almost here, but it's not too late to join in on the excitement of the regular season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a chance to finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's right, just bet $5, and if you win, you're walking away with $250,000 in bonus bets to play with. I love using FanDuel because they make betting so much fun. From picking which players are going to score touchdowns to guessing total team points, there's always a way to add a little bit of thrill to the game. Whether it's the big plays or the small moments, FanDuel has you covered. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com today to join. That's FanDuel.com, where you can get $250 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen. Maybe it's your first watch on YouTube every single day. We really appreciate the support as we head into 2025, another year of this podcast that began really all the way back in 2013. Not Locked On Hornets, but the origins of this podcast trace all the way back to 2013. And I think we started doing this in 2016. So we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of Locked On Hornets, just a couple of years away. So, we love this. I mean, you know, these kind of games are tough to watch, but I love the interaction, the chat that we had last night on Every Hornets Box Score, the camaraderie that we all share, the sickness that we all share in continuing to watch this team and hope that one day this thing turns around. But I think what's clear from this game is the same thing that became clear in the last couple of losses, which is this team needs a shakeup. You can call it blow it up. You can call it shake it up. Whatever you want to call it. Charles Lee has some work to do. LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Miles Bridges, they all have some work to do and to figure out sort of game to game, night to night, how are we going to recover out of this tailspin? Because you want to get to some place where you're playing functional basketball for the good of your team so you don't learn how to lose. You can learn how to win. Like, that's the challenge for them. But really, in terms of their ability to make the playoffs in the future, I think it's got to be Jeff Peterson. You got to put a great basketball team around LaMelo Ball. You got to put a great basketball team around Brandon Miller and get these guys playoff experience. So that's where I don't think they got to blow it up in terms of get horrible and stay horrible for a few years. I think you've got to find a way to use the first round picks that you've accumulated. Use the first round pick that I think is very likely that you are going to have this upcoming draft, and it might be a great first round pick. If it's number 1 overall and you're sure about Cooper Flagg, then take Cooper Flagg. But if you're not sure or you end up with the 2nd or 3rd pick, package that sucker up too, because another rookie that can't immediately come in and contribute, I don't know that, particularly after picking Tijon Salon, and I got to watch Bub Carrington and I got to watch all these other rookies, make splashes. I don't know how willing and able fans are going to be able to take another prospect that's going to take 2 or 3 years. And I'm not talking about a Tijon Salon level 18-year-old, but even like a 19 or 20-year-old that might take a few years to come together. I don't know that that's going to be healthy for the team moving forward, or LaMelo Ball or Brandon Miller. But the front office has got to be honest about what the problems are and be willing, even if you call a particular player a core player, if it looks like that player is not developing in the way that you need that player to develop, then move on and bring in players that will. Players that can shoot, players that are dedicated to playing defense the way that Charles Lee wants his team to play defense, players that are taller than 6'6" on the wing. Continue to bring those kinds of players in. That's what you have to find. Savvy veterans, that would also be fun too. Continue to do that. Ones that will play. Like having Taj Gibson in the locker room to run players-only meetings, awesome. Doesn't help them on the floor. Doesn't do the things that prevent the players-only meeting from being necessary in the first place. All right, so I wanted to do a little tape study. So 24 seconds left to go in the game. The Hornets, I think at this point, they were up 1. This was after the sidelines out of bounds play that I mentioned, the lob to Mark Williams. A lot of lob action in this game. The Hornets did a good job of, again, there's some simple pick and roll stuff that they didn't have early in the season that they have now, and they've executed well on it. It's everything else that's terrible. So shot comes off for Washington, and there are 4 Charlotte Hornets hanging around the rim. There's Brandon Miller, there's LaMelo Ball, there's Josh Green, and then there's Moussa Diabate, who was subbed in for Mark Williams because they did offense for defense sub on Mark Williams. On a critical possession, they had Moussa Diabate in the game to get the rebound. to be physical. So Diabate's in, and ball comes off the rim. Brandon Miller doesn't do a good job of blocking out. Josh Green looks at Moussa Diabate and is like, you got this. Doesn't go to the ball. Because Moussa Diabate did a good job of blocking his man out. And it looked like he had great position. But Josh Green, if you're Josh Green, everybody has to react to the basketball. You're up 1 point with 22 seconds left to go in the game. Go and get the basketball. Everybody. LaMelo Ball, same thing. Kind of trailing the play, waiting to get back into transition to be available for the pass. Go and get the ball. Miles Bridges was the only player that I'm letting off the hook because he was too far away from the play that I think to make an impact. If you're Brandon Miller, be physical. Block out. Josh Green, go get the ball. LaMelo Ball, get the ball. People are going to look at that play and go, Moussa Diabate, hold on to the ball. Because what happens is Washington rips the ball out of his hands and then eventually gets like a scramble play layup, and that's what put them ahead. That's what set up the opportunity for Jordan Poole to get the three. Actually, this was before the slot play, so the slot play would come after that would then put them ahead, and then the Poole three. So I had my order a little wrong there. But that was, to me, that's not on Diabate losing the basketball in that position. That's on everyone else not scrambling for the basketball. And that, again, to me, is like those were things that were talked about in preseason and training camp that they just haven't gotten back to. So moving forward, they come back home to play OKC. Then they're going to go back out on the road for a few games. Oh, man, games against Chicago, Detroit, teams that they've struggled with, that they probably shouldn't struggle with. No team is in that point now. That was the sort of old analysis, right? But every team, I think you have to go into a game going, all right, the Hornets are going to struggle until they show me otherwise. But OKC played it close with Indiana. Like, it's not impossible for the Hornets to find OKC in a trap game there. It's improbable, but it's not impossible. There's the hope. There's the sickness perking up again. But moving forward, they've got to find a way to play, again, decent basketball that is not an abomination unto basketball, which is what that first half against the Wizards was. So many transition points given up. So many turnovers that are not, I'm trying to make a play and I make a good play. There's a lane open for me at the rim and somebody gets in there and nabs it. Or I'm trying to fit it into a gap and I just don't quite make it. These are turnovers that are like, what were you put the fingers on the temples and you go, what were you thinking? You yell at your television screen, and then your significant other tells you to keep it down. You're like, I wish I could. I want to keep it down. I want to be calm. I can't be calm when I have to watch this kind of basketball. So the challenge for them is to find basketball that's short of that. Seems like a low bar to clear. They haven't been able to do it. All right. That's it for me this week. That's going to be it for me next week. But I will rejoin the show the following week with Walker Mail. Thank you for your support as we close out another year of Locked On Hornets. We're free, we're daily, we're committed to this team, and hopefully we brought you a few laughs and joy along the way because the Hornets have been a little short on that this season, but you do have a few. I made this comment. This will be the last thing I say. I made this comment to someone in every Hornets box score. Watching this team in that first half was a lot like watching the Bobcats, except there were 0 players on that team that you could even trick yourself into thinking were going to be a superstar player. Like you can squint and go, LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, they've got opportunities if they develop certain aspects of their game to be superstars in this league. In their game and in their attitude and their mindset. But on those Bobcats teams, that didn't exist. So that's the hope. Major changes, new outlook, but it's got to be that. It can't be trimming around the edges. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks to David Walker and Walker Mail. For them, I'm Doug, saying go Hornets, go America. Let's swarm Charlotte and have a happy, happy, happy New Year.